I catch a lot of flack for my preference of point ignition systems and carburetors. I see it in the comments all the time. Boomer can't wrap his head around the new technology. He's stuck in the past. Right? Put an HEI in it. I hear it all the time. But you know, what a lot of people don't realize is that I didn't just fall out of a tree and start doing this yesterday. Back in the 1980s, when I was doing car magazines full-time, I was right on the cutting edge of the whole EFI revolution. I was the first person to put a Buick turbo car in the 13s. I was the first person to put a TPI Chevy in the 13s. And me and the EQ4 were like this, right? And I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, do research and you can find it yourself. The articles are out there. And even before then, back in the 70s, when I first started screwing around with cars for myself, one of the first things I would do when I began a project was swap from points to electronic ignition, because that was the thing to do, right? Points to junk, electronic ignition. But you know, even back then, when I would make that swap, go from points to electronic, I never felt any difference. You know, it's supposed to be there, the car was supposed to start quicker, it's supposed to get better gas mileage, it's supposed to make more horsepower, but it never did. It was always the same. So like I said, 1980s, I'm doing car magazines. I'm a tech editor for a bunch of different magazines. I'm writing for those, and I'm all about EFI for a couple of years. But then something happened. Towards the end of the 1980s into the 1990s, I drifted over into the world of nitro cars. And I found a funny thing there, right? The basic technology was like primitive. It was like from the 1800s. We were using mechanical fuel injection, no electronic to be found. And the ignition systems were magnetos with single point triggering devices. So basically, it was, you know, an 1890, you know, ignition system, a 5-amp mag with a single set of points triggering it. And you know, we're making at the time over 5,000 horsepower, and we're spinning these things over 8,200 RPM. And the only part of the whole system we're not having any trouble with at all are the ignitions. Go figure, right? So when I drifted back into the world of gasoline engines, I started playing around making like deliberate back-to-back tests to see if it made a difference. And I did it with motorcycles, did it with cars, to see if there was a difference. You know, where am I going to find, you know, the best edge? And I could never discern a real operating difference between points, a well-set, a well-tuned set of points, and any electronic ignition. So since I've been doing this channel, I've been a proponent of this old school technology because it works. And one of the things I've referred back to often is an article that was in Hot Rod magazine. You can find it right now. If you go to hotrod.com, let me show you this thing. If you go to hotrod.com, look up ignition performance test, ignition shootout points versus HEI. Now this is a rare article. It's the only one of its kind that I know of. There might be others out there, but it's the only one I've ever seen. And why is it rare? Why don't you see this? Because in this dyno test, that single point Chevy distributor, stock single point Chevy distributor, outshines the two HEIs. Both. Now what they did was the comparison here was between the stock Chevy single point distributor, stock HEI, and this hot rod HEI. And for the purposes of this test, all three of these distributors were curved exactly the same way. So they were all in by 3,000 RPM, and the engine, the test mule was, and this was done at West Tech Performance, which is like the gold standard of recognized performance, you know, of dyno testing. And each test was run 3 times. Here's a funny thing about this particular article, and I'll almost guarantee, if you're interested in this, find this and copy it down now. You know, download it now, because I have a funny feeling if this video gets any legs, they're going to pull this down. Because here's the thing, right? And this is, you have to understand something about this industry, right? Nobody makes any money unless they're selling you something bigger, better, louder, faster, flashier, the next tech, the next revolution, the next whatever it happens to be. Nobody in this business makes any money telling you to stick to the basics and work with what you have, except maybe me, right? Everybody else, you know, and that was the situation here. The original version of this article was much longer than the one that's up here now. This is an abbreviated version, and it was abbreviated Probably because in the main copy of the original article, it really extolled the virtues of the single point distributor. In this case here, they cut it down. They cut it down to just these two short paragraphs. Okay, so just the opening paragraph doesn't really say anything, and then here they're describing the engine that they used. So this is a typical street and strip small block Chevy. It's one of their Dyno mule motors named Pepe, right? 350 Chevy, 9.5 to 1 compression, mild cob cam, the aluminum heads, Victor Jr. intake, 750 Holly, like just typical stuff. So what they did was they ran and they curved each of the distributors so that all of the advance was in by 3,000 RPM. They start the test at 3,500. So advance isn't in the picture here. The rest of the article, that they cut out, like I said, they cut out the meat of it. They edited it down, but the rest of it is three experts. Here is one guy from a performance distributor says, one guy from Axel says, one guy from MSD says, and they each use a paragraph, explaining why you should convert to electronic ignition, in spite of the fact that this dyno test shows that the points are superior. So let's go down here. Let's look at this, right? So here's the points. These two columns are the points. This is the stock HEI. This is the hot rod HEI, okay? 3,500 RPM, the starting point of this test, right? Look at this. The points are making 241 horsepower. The stock HEI is making 238 horsepower. That's 3 less. The hot rod HEI is making 244, which is 3 more. But the point is, the points are right there in the middle between the stock and the hot rod HEI. You really need to study this whole chart on your own, but I'm just going to hit the highlights here. Okay, get right to the meat of things. 5,200 RPM, torque peaks, right? 406 for the points. Now remember, this is a stock Chevy single point distributor. 406 for the points, 403 for the HEI, 403 for the hot rod HEI, right? And look at the horsepower numbers at 5,200 RPM. The stock single point Chevy distributor is making 402 horsepower. At that same RPM, the HEI is doing 399 horsepower, and so is the hot rod HEI. So at 5,200 RPM, we have a winner with the points. Now we go to the peaks. All right, now this engine really liked to rev, okay? 6,600 RPM, or 6,700 RPM, the stock HEI maxes out at 446 horsepower. The hot rod HEI, 452. Now 100 RPM later, at 6,800, the points are in there at 444 horsepower. So 2 behind the regular HEI, and okay, a significant number, 8 behind the hot rod HEI. But then look what happens at 6,900, because evidently this engine kind of hit a wall, either the camshaft or whatever it was. That was where it stopped making power. But it's 6,900 RPM. The single point ignition is making 424 horsepower. Both of the HEIs are at 417. Okay, and then at 7,000 RPM. At 7,000 RPM, where you say, oh no single point ignition is going to go that high. At 7,000 RPM, single points are done, right? There's no way. Point, float, balance in the whole 10 yards. Well, not here. Okay, at 7,000 RPM, the points are making 391 horsepower. The HEI is making 384, and the hot rod HEI 387. Guys, I can't make this stuff up. That's a legitimate dyno test done by Westech for Hot Rod Magazine that shows overall the superiority of a stock single point Chevy ignition to the HEI and then a modified HEI at 7,000 RPM. Can't make this stuff up, okay? Don't take my word for it. Go to hotrod.com, search this thing, and look at these numbers yourself, right? You can't make this stuff up. So I just wanted to throw that out there because, like I said, every time we do something, I did the thing with Pages Nova, and I put an HEI and I put an HEI. It doesn't do you any better. And I prefer analog technology. Now, I'm not saying that you should not use HEI or any electronic ignition system for that matter. I am not down on electronic ignition systems. You have to understand that. I understand them. I know how they work. I appreciate them. My preference for these things is for my own cars, my cars, what I want to work with. I like the simplicity and the ultimate analog reliability of points. There's no troubleshooting involved. There's nothing. It's just simple, take a screwdriver, gap it, done, right? And check it every few thousand miles. You're good to go. That's my personal preference. So again, this video isn't about, talking, don't run HEI. I'm not saying anything like that at all. I'm just saying that this is my personal preference. This is what I like on my cars. And here are the reasons why I make this stand. We'll do carburetor versus fuel injection on the next one, right? Okay, that's it. I'll see you tomorrow.